What if the world's largest desert, 9 million square kilometers of burning, lifeless sand, was not always a desert at all? What if beneath the dunes that stretch endlessly to every horizon, beneath the cracked, sun-scorched rock and the blinding heat that kills everything it touches, there are rivers, lakes, cities, an entire civilization buried, forgotten, and waiting? What if the Sahara is not a wasteland? What if it is a graveyard? The Sahara Desert is the largest hot desert on Earth. It covers most of northern Africa, stretching from the Atlantic coast in the west all the way to the Red Sea in the east. It is roughly the size of the United States. In the summer, temperatures in its interior can reach 70 degrees Celsius on the ground surface. Rain in many parts of the Sahara falls less than once a year. In some regions, it has not rained in living memory. It is, by almost every measure, one of the most hostile environments on the surface of this planet. And for most of human history, that is what we assumed it had always been. We were wrong. Profoundly, extraordinarily wrong. Because hidden beneath the sand, in the rock, in the fossils, in ancient riverbeds carved deep into stone that hasn't seen water in thousands of years, is a story so different from what we see on the surface that it changes everything about how we understand this part of the world. The Sahara was once green. Not partially green. Not green along its edges. Green everywhere. Lush, wet, teeming with life. A landscape of rivers and lakes and forests and grasslands that would be completely unrecognizable to anyone who has only ever seen the desert we know today. And the people who lived in that Green Sahara, the civilizations that rose and fell in its river valleys, that fished in its lakes, that painted the faces of their gods on cave walls that are still standing in the middle of the desert today, those people are still largely unknown to us. We are only now beginning to find them. Let's go back. Let's go back much further than most history books take us. About 11,000 years ago, the Earth's climate underwent a profound shift. The planet had just emerged from the last ice age. The slow, grinding changes in Earth's orbit around the sun, tiny shifts that take thousands of years to complete, altered the way sunlight fell on the northern hemisphere. The African summer monsoon intensified. Rain began to fall on land that had previously been dry, and the Sahara transformed. Scientists called this period the African humid period. Some researchers call it the Green Sahara, and it lasted for thousands of years, from roughly 11,000 years ago to around 5,000 years ago. During that period, the Sahara received enough rainfall to sustain a landscape almost unimaginably different from today. There were rivers, great rivers, some of them comparable in scale to the Nile, flowing across what is now empty desert. There were lakes, some of them enormous. Lake Mega Chad, which existed in the basin of what is now the mostly dry Lake Chad in Central Africa, was at its peak larger than the entire Caspian Sea. It was one of the largest freshwater lakes ever to exist on Earth, and it sat in the middle of what is now desert. Along the banks of those rivers and lakes, in the grasslands and forests that spread across the Sahara, animals lived. Hippos, elephants, giraffes, crocodiles, animals that today exist only in sub-Saharan Africa, south of the desert, in the green lands that the Sahara once was. Their fossils are found in the middle of the desert. Their bones lie in the sand, hundreds of kilometers from any place that could support them today. And humans lived there too, in great numbers, for thousands of years. The first hint of just how populated the Green Sahara once was came not from an archaeological excavation. It came from a cave. Deep in the Caucasus Mountains of southwestern Libya, in a region so remote and so inhospitable that few outsiders had ever entered it, Italian explorer and archaeologist Paolo Graziosi discovered something in the 1950s that stopped him completely. The walls of the caves were covered in paintings. Not scratches, not faint markings. Vivid, detailed, remarkably sophisticated paintings. Images of animals and humans and scenes of daily life, painted in ochre and charcoal and mineral pigments by people who understood composition, who understood perspective, who understood how to make a flat stone surface come alive. And what they had painted was not a desert. They had painted hippos bathing in rivers, cattle grazing in open grasslands, people dancing, hunting, fishing from boats. A world so completely different from the Sahara we know today that scientists initially struggled to accept what they were seeing. These were not mythological images. These were not abstract symbols. These were records, visual records made by people who lived in that world, for whom rivers and grasslands and herds of cattle were simply the everyday landscape of their lives. The Akakis cave paintings are now a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and they are just one site among hundreds of rock art locations scattered across the Sahara, from Mauritania to Egypt, from Algeria to Sudan. Paintings and carvings that together form an extraordinary portrait of a civilization, or rather, many civilizations, that lived and flourished in what is now the world's greatest desert. But the cave paintings were only the beginning. In 2000, a team of archaeologists working in the Sahara Desert in Niger, one of the most remote and desolate regions of the Sahara, made a discovery that reframed our understanding of deep human prehistory in Africa. They found a cemetery, not a small burial site, not a handful of graves, a vast cemetery. Hundreds of burials, some of them dating back approximately 10,000 years, others more recent from around 5,000 years ago. Two separate populations of people buried in the same place across thousands of years of time. The site was named Gobero, and it is one of the largest known Stone Age cemeteries in Africa. Among the burials were scenes of extraordinary tenderness. A woman buried with her arms wrapped around two children, a final embrace preserved in bone for 10,000 years. Individuals buried with jewelry, with tools, with flowers. Evidence of ritual, of community, of a people who cared for their dead with the same love and ceremony as any culture in history. Around the burial site were the bones of animals, hippos, fish, turtles, crocodiles. All animals that require water, and lots of it. The people buried at Gobero had lived beside a lake. They had fished and hunted and built their community on shores that are now buried under meters of sand. They had no idea that one day the water would disappear, that the rains would stop, that the green world they knew would burn and dry and blow away until there was nothing left but sand and heat and silence. And neither did the next civilization to rise in their place. The question that archaeologists kept returning to, as more and more evidence of the Green Sahara accumulated, was this: where did the people go? When the rains stopped, when the monsoon shifted and the African humid period came to an end around 5,000 years ago, the transformation of the Sahara from green to desert was not instantaneous. But it was, in geological terms, relatively rapid. Within a few centuries, rivers dried up. Lakes shrank and vanished. The grasslands turned to scrub, and the scrub turned to sand. The people who had lived in the Sahara for thousands of years had to move. And where did millions of people go when the desert rose around them? Many researchers now believe that the answer to this question is one of the most important insights in the history of human civilization. They went to the Nile. The drying of the Sahara pushed enormous populations toward the only remaining reliable source of water in northeastern Africa, the Nile River Valley. And the sudden arrival of these populations, these communities with their agricultural knowledge, their cattle herding traditions, their understanding of water management and community organization, may have provided the human energy and demographic complexity that gave rise to one of the greatest civilizations in history, ancient Egypt. The rise of Egyptian civilization, around 5,000 years ago, coincides almost precisely with the end of the Green Sahara. The connection is not proven definitively, but the evidence is compelling and the timing is remarkable. The people who built the pyramids may have been, in part, the descendants of communities who once fished in the lakes of the Green Sahara. But the Green Sahara is only part of the story, because even after the desert formed, people lived in it, adapted to it, built in it, and what they built is still there, buried under the sand, invisible from the surface, waiting to be found. This is where the story takes a turn that sounds like science fiction. In 2011, a team of researchers using NASA satellite imagery, specifically radar satellites capable of penetrating beneath sand and soil, announced a discovery that stunned the archaeological community. They had found, buried beneath the sands of the Egyptian desert, a vast network of hidden features. Ancient river channels, invisible from the surface, snaking across the landscape. And more than that, settlements, structures, the outlines of buried streets and buildings lying just beneath the sand. Using radar that could see through meters of desert sediment, the satellite had mapped what appeared to be an entirely unknown ancient landscape. Roads, building foundations, what might be tombs, what might be temples, none of it visible, none of it known, until a camera in space looked down and saw through the surface. The lead researcher, Dr. Sarah Parcak of the University of Alabama, called it space archaeology, and the findings were extraordinary. 17 potential pyramid sites, more than 1,000 tombs, 3,000 ancient settlements, 3,000 in a region that we thought we had largely explored. And this was just one survey in one part of North Africa using technology that was relatively new. The radar did not penetrate everywhere. It did not look at the whole Sahara. It looked at a portion, and it found thousands of hidden sites. What is buried under the rest? There is a lost city that researchers have been searching for on and off for centuries. Its name is Zerzura. Medieval Arabic texts describe it as a white city in the desert, a city of sleeping giants filled with treasure, hidden somewhere in the Libyan desert west of the Nile. Arab travelers and geographers wrote about it in the 13th and 14th centuries, always describing it as a place heard of, never a place seen. A city that existed just beyond the edge of the known world. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, European explorers became obsessed with finding it. Expeditions were mounted across the Egyptian and Libyan deserts, some of them serious scientific efforts, some of them driven by treasure-hunting fantasies. None of them found Zerzura, but several of them found something almost as remarkable. They found the Gilf Kabir, a vast plateau in the southwestern corner of Egypt, rising from the desert like a fortress, remote and barely accessible even today. And in the valleys of the Gilf Kabir, hidden from the outside world, they found the Cave of Swimmers. Discovered in 1933 by Hungarian explorer Laszlo Almasi, the real-life figure who inspired the novel The English Patient, the Cave of Swimmers contains paintings of human figures in postures that can only be described as swimming. Their arms are extended. Their legs are kicking. They are unmistakably depicted as people in water. In the middle of what is now one of the driest places on Earth, people once swam. People painted the experience of swimming on a cave wall because it was part of their daily life. Because the water was there. The cave is real. The paintings are real. The swimmers are real. And somewhere under the sand of the Gilf Kabir and in the broader Sahara around it, the world those swimmers lived in is still buried. Let's talk about what else is down there. Because the cave paintings and the buried settlements are only the visible edge of something much larger. Beneath the Sahara Desert, there are rivers. Not ancient, dry riverbeds, though those exist too in enormous numbers, carved into the bedrock beneath the sand. There are actual rivers. Underground rivers, flowing through aquifers trapped beneath the rock. Water that fell as rain during the Green Sahara period and has been stored there ever since, frozen in time underground, waiting. The Nubian sandstone aquifer system is one of the largest known fossil water aquifers on Earth. It lies beneath the northeastern Sahara, beneath Egypt, Libya, Sudan, and Chad, and it contains an estimated estimate of 150,000 cubic kilometers of water. Water that is, in some parts of the aquifer, more than 1 million years old. There are other aquifers, other underground systems. The Sahara sits on top of water in a way that most people have never been told. And where there is water, even ancient, buried water, there is potential for life. And where there is potential for life, there were once people. The underground landscape of the Sahara is a map of what it once was. A memory, written in water and rock, of the green world that preceded the desert. Here is what is remarkable and what should stay with you. We think of the Sahara as permanent, as fixed, as simply the way that part of the world is and always has been. We look at those 9 million square kilometers of sand and stone and it feels timeless, ancient, unchanging. But it isn't any of those things. The Sahara has been a desert before, and before that, it was green. And before that, it was a desert again. Scientists believe the Sahara has cycled between wet and dry multiple times in the past few 100,000 years, following the rhythm of Earth's orbital cycles around the Sun, a cycle that repeats roughly every 26,000 years. Which means that the desert we see today is not a permanent feature of the Earth. It is a phase, a season in geological time. And here is the part that is almost too large to hold in your mind. The next green period may already be beginning. Some climate scientists believe that the Sahara will begin to green again within the next few thousand years, as the orbital cycle turns, as the monsoon shifts, as the rains return to the north. If that happens, everything buried under the sand will begin to emerge. The ancient riverbeds will fill. The buried cities will be uncovered. The bones of the people who swam in the lakes and painted the cave walls and built their lives in a world we cannot imagine, their bones will rise back toward the surface. But for now, it all waits. The sand keeps its secrets the way only a desert can, completely, patiently, without apology. Somewhere beneath the dunes, there are cities we haven't named. There are civilizations we haven't counted. There are rivers that haven't flowed in 5,000 years, still traced in the stone beneath our feet. There are cave walls with paintings that no human eye has seen since the people who made them turned and walked away, following the retreating rains south, not knowing they would never come back. The Sahara does not look like a place full of history. That is exactly what it wants you to think. We have satellites that can see through sand. We have radar that can map buried riverbeds from space. We have technologies that our predecessors could not have imagined, trained on a desert that has barely been scratched. And every time we look, every time a satellite passes over, every time an archaeologist pushes their trowel into the sand in the right place, we find something we didn't know was there. 3,000 settlements, 17 pyramid sites, a cemetery with 10,000 years of burials, a cave full of swimmers in the driest desert on Earth. What else is under the sand? The answer, almost certainly, is this: more than we can imagine, more than we have found, more than the desert will easily give up. The Sahara keeps its dead well. It is dry enough to preserve. It is remote enough to hide. It is vast enough that we have barely begun to search it. And somewhere out there, beneath the heat and the silence and the endless miles of golden sand, the Green Sahara is waiting to be remembered. Not just by scientists, not just by archaeologists with their radar satellites and their careful brushes, but by all of us. Because this story, the story of a world that was green, that was alive, that was full of people who loved and mourned and painted their world on cave walls, is not a distant story. It is our story. Every one of us is descended from people who survived a changing world. People who moved when the water disappeared. People who found a new river when the old one dried up. People who carried their history with them in their hands and their memory when everything else was taken away. The Sahara buried their world, but it did not erase it. It never could. If this changed how you see the desert, if it made the sand feel a little less empty and a little more full of the past, share this video. Someone out there needs to know that the world is older, stranger, and more full of lost stories than we were ever taught. Subscribe, because history is not only in the places we look, sometimes it is deepest in the places we have ignored.